Hey guys, Thomas the Slow Jr. here, aka Mustache Tom, and I'm here to review DoLittle. If you end up enjoying this review, then consider joining my Patreon page. That'll be the second link in the description below. Now, before I begin, as you can see, I finally figured out my lighting issue a little bit. I'm sorry if it still looks a little staticky. Any Patreon support will allow me to continue, otherwise, homelessness or trying to find a job, which seems impossible right now, are my options, which are really bad options. Alrighty, let's get right into it. So, the movie begins with a little bit of narration. The narration is told by one of the animals in DoLittle's care. Alrighty, so DoLittle was with a woman named Lily, and they were together for a while, and they went on adventures according to the narration, and then she passed away. We cut to a young boy whose name I actually never learned in the movie, but he is our protege, as we will learn, who at the beginning of the film is a hunter, or is the son of a hunter, I should say. He manages to misfire and hit a squirrel. He's given a knife to end the job, and he says that he will do it on his own. Instead, he goes off to find some help, and he ends up coming across DoLittle's mansion or estate, or whatever you want to call it. He ends up getting caught in a trap. All the while, a duck ends up waking up Mr. Dr. DoLittle, played by Robert Downey Jr., and he's playing some chess with this ape, who has this fearful demeanor, as we see. All the while, the animals are, of course, talking to him, that is the gimmick, and he can understand them. All the while, a young girl named Lady Rose, she's part of high standards, I suppose, is one way to put it. She enters in asking for some assistance. All the while, DoLittle's trying to do his best to get rid of both of these children. However, when he neglects to take on her case, the boy shows off the squirrel that is injured, and he takes that case instead. So the both of them watch on as DoLittle does his job to take care of this squirrel. And the boy catches on that DoLittle, or Dr. DoLittle, is speaking in each of their languages. After that, the parrot, the one that we learn at the end of the movie is the one narrating, is the one that tells us, or the one that overhears that the young girl, young Rose, is associated with the Queen of England, and that if she passes away, that will mess up his whole arrangement of what he's doing with his work. All the while, so that is what, by the way, causes DoLittle to inevitably accept this whole ordeal. All the while outside, this ostrich and polar bear are fighting with each other. Not in the sense of like physically fighting, but like, oh, you're this type of animal that does this, but you're not this. The ostrich being mocked for not being a proper bird, and the polar bear mocked for not being a proper bear, I guess. And the polar bear is voiced by John Cena. You can't see him except, I guess, when he's a big guy, which is actually surprisingly often. Anyway, so the doctor comes across as he's making his way into the Queen, to his rival, McFly. I think that's his name anyway. That's what I heard. So that's what I put in my notes, and that's what I'm reporting to you. All the while the doctor's making his way in, the boy sneaks in as well. So once the doctor enters the room of the Queen, he's checking all the animals that are within the room, checking in with the octopus, checking in with the these other animals, and he's able, with their help, to find the problem, and that the cure is some sort of rare, almost impossible to find antidote, but not impossible, just close. Um, so, this allows some sort of death clock or time, like a little bit of, uh-oh. Uh, all the while, Rose gives the boy a little gift. So the boy begs DoLittle to go home, and he's forced to end up going home regardless. Anyway, the parrot, since it's the parrot, is able to speak English and is talking to the boy about joining them regardless. They also gain the help of a giraffe that helps them out, and there's a fox with them that's all about the resistance constantly. So they all head out, and they're getting chased. All the while, DoLittle's already at sea, traveling to this rare location to a location that will help him get to the rare location, I should say. And all the while, the boy is getting helped to the docks, and then he has to jump to the boat, which he does. So the parrot eventually has Dr. DoLittle be like, you gotta let this boy with you. All the while, the remaining crew's animals are messing around a little bit. And the boy in this point of the movie is trying to learn how to talk to the animals himself. This is the middle point where the ostrich and polar bear exchange another argument about, again, what an ostrich can't do and what a polar bear can't do, or whatever. All the while they get interrupted, and the boy calls out that there's a warship coming after them. So, within that instance, DoLittle tries to give some more bravery tips to the gorilla, and they set up for this trap, and the boy grabs the rope as DoLittle's heading underwater, but so they manage to pull him back up. We also see, if it wasn't obvious enough, that this McFly guy is super obsessed with outdoing DoLittle, up to the point of like, ooh, So we see that the boy is starting to put a little bit more of the language parts together, and he's steering the ship as DoLittle and him are having a little alone time, if it were. So they go to this island where this guy named Razuli is in charge, and this Razuli guy does not like Dr. DoLittle at all. So he puts on a poorly made disguise, and they get help from a firefly to do this whole mafia bit with these ants. All the while, the boy sneaks into the bars, and he sneaks into the room of Razuli, into the chamber where they can get this book that will help them get more intel. But DoLittle gets stopped, the kid gets found, and we learn that Razuli is the father of the woman at the beginning, the one that DoLittle was with. So DoLittle is put in a cage, and the boy is trying to send a message to the other animals to help out. So DoLittle is trying to buy some time as a tiger is brought into the room, and this tiger is like a little unhinged. So he's trying to use all these different tricks, trying to talk to him, trying to use like cat-like reflexes with the light. And this buys enough time for the fly to get the other animals to come aboard. The gorilla does some moving in. The boy grabs the book while all this is going down. But as soon as he steps outside, McFly is already there to get the book. So, as McFly heads out to the location, he has Dr. DoLittle's ship blown up with the remaining animals inside, but they all manage to escape. But the ostrich almost sinks because he can't swim, so the polar bear saves him, and then the ostrich feels indebted. And while Dr. Doolittle feels like he has failed and is regaling his failure, Masuli is listening in and hearing all of how much he cared for Rasuli's daughter, which causes him to take it a little easier on Doolittle and tells him to go off. So, they get a new boat. They use the whales to help them track ahead to find out and to tail um, the bad guy McFly's location. So they track him to this cliff place and moves in. All the while, McFly is feeling super confident being there first. He's always trying to outdo him being there in this location that could, solve the problem. And he pikes the floor of this flag on the ground, and it causes the ground to quake. And this is where the movie gets a little odd. I forget where this happens earlier in the movie, but there was a part of the book I think they read, or legends that Doolittle knew beforehand, or I think it was actually earlier when McFly was like talking about how Doolittle had this obsession with the animals, and he mentioned how he believed that there was a dragon. And what you know, at the third act, there is indeed a dragon, and everyone's freaking out. All the army guys that are with McFly are freaking out. All Doolittle's guys are freaking out. So the dragon attacks, and Doolittle is grabbed in the process. And the dragon feels pain just like him, so he manages to negotiate his way out of that by seeing that, and wants to help this dragon, and the dragon finally says yes. And to get even odder, I think this movie really shows its hand about what type of movie it is, Doolittle proceeds to put the gloves on, or not, I don't know, it doesn't really show it, but it shows Doolittle getting in and all in that dragon butt. Right in there. Thus, he is able to pull out all his various armor pieces, apparently, that the dragon has been eating. So, after that, they're given this rare food that they're trying to find. They run back. The guards try to seize them, although that doesn't make any sense. She is given the treatment. The queen wakes up. And this old man that we see at the beginning of the movie, and the one who does the whispers to McFly there, the one pulling the strings all along, they find out that he was the one who was behind it all along and is caught and pulled away. Meanwhile, Rose gives the boy a nice little kiss, a nice little young crush there. We cut to some time ahead where the boy becomes more of an expert in picking up the language, and Doolittle helps out other animals in the process. And that was DoLittle. So it's pretty obvious that this is a very different interpretation of the story of Dr. Doolittle. In the form of the story, it would appear that he already knows that he can speak with animals. In fact, he has already established that as his job, if it were. Other outsiders don't seem to understand that, but he is already doing that as his job. The whole, having an apprenticeship is also, I believe, a new story part. I've never made this a secret. I'm quite a fan of passing the torch down successfully. I believe that this movie is a little bit closer in that regard. In terms of just like, hey, boy wants to become the thing. He's very excitable, trying to learn. I think they could have given him, I think him being a hunter, I think, navigating around that a little bit more would have been a little bit more interesting, too. Because the boy is a little bit generic in terms of just like, oh, I'm just gonna learn the stuff more and more, and pretty easily, too. DoLittle story, again, is very different here from what I can recall. Um, so yeah, I do think that, I think that this has a younger audience feel, especially at the end of the movies where that final card reveals itself of like, oh boy, you gotta go in a dragon butt, haha, kind of fun for the kids to be like, haha, it's going in the butt. Um, and, the whole objective of like save the queen. So that really places it in a time and a place, instead of uh, the doctor being, or this particular doctor, Dr. DoLittle, having it be a surprise, having it, have all that different stuff of like in the city. So yeah, I think trying to tell a different story is interesting. As I mentioned, passing the torch down is something I'm a fan of. The characters technically do, some of them go on a character arc either without his help or with his help directly. The gorilla gains more confidence with his help more directly. The polar bear and the ostrich, who are at odds, kind of figure their own nonsense out together. The squirrel is kind of like, yeah, I just accept that I was almost killed, and then kind of is in that light for a long time. Is like, yeah, whatever. So that one was a little bit like, okay. Um, some of the animals I do feel were a little bit unnecessary. The fox is completely unnecessary. I mean, the giraffe just carried him to the boat anyway. So there were just a few unnecessary animals at times. The dog just sort of stays behind to look out for, none of the shenanigans are going about, but there are other animals there too. So I'd give it either a 5 or a 6 out of 10. I think I'd go closer to a 6 actually. Um, I think that this is quite all right. Um, Again, I think they definitely need to do a little bit more with the boy though. They had a pretty solid start. I'll say that much. Having him be a hunter, or be the family of a hunter, I should say more specifically, is a definitely an interesting ground when comparison to direct contrast of person who takes care of animals directly, and how I think that mentality should have been more shifting, or I mean, not necessarily shifting, but more on so on DoLittle's part than his part, and have the boy have a flaw or something, because he kind of just picks up the language, and that's sort of his entire thing. Other than that, yeah, pretty alright. So that's my review of DoLittle, and if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head over to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page. Any donations are desperately needed, and until next time, everyone, bye-bye!